Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. As I imagine many of you listening to this show can agree with, when I first began experimenting with psychedelics and plant medicines, many members of my friends and family group began questioning my path. They would attempt to place their own fears and anxieties surrounding these medicines onto me with the intention of protecting me, and in doing so, I was able to flip the script on the story I was telling myself about these actions. At first, I wanted to rebel and tell myself I knew what I was doing. However, when I really sat into it, I took these suggestions from my friends and family as opportunities to continue asking myself why I was so interested in exploring these medicines. And in doing so, I was able to find a deep sense of belief in myself and belief in what my heart was calling for. This allowed me to integrate more of the medicine that psychedelics was supplying for me at that time, which was to find strength in my own intuition and have faith in what my own unique expression of life was calling for. Today's guest on the show is someone who knows what this pattern feels like in his own life and has not only moved through it in his own way, but has also found the golden thread within it and created a platform for others who are experiencing similar challenges with family to find solace in. He is the host of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, which dives down some of the deepest rabbit holes possible within the world and seeks to question everything we think we know about life to continue illuminating the pure mystery that is life. This episode is sure to be a deep dive in not only his experiences, but also what meaning he has made out of those experiences and how his life has benefited from them as a result. So please, help me in welcoming my man, Mark Steves, to the show. Mark, my brother, it was such a pleasure to have you here, man.
Wow. And I hope you have video for this because I just raced to finish rolling this up while you gave me that amazing intro. For everyone who's listening, if this is your thing, now's the moment. Spark up and get into the flow.
Yes.
And Ryan, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and everyone who tunes in.
You are so welcome, man. And, for everyone listening, Mark and I just did an amazing episode on his show, which we're going to be tying into this show and releasing as a swap cast, which I am so jazzed up about. And we were just talking before we, started about this whole working smarter, not harder thing with podcasting and how to keep it fun for the listeners, right? Where they're able to hear different voices, right? And also hear your voice, but on the other end of the spectrum, right? Where you're not hosting, but you're getting interviewed and vice versa. And I think it's so much fun. And, one of the things that I've loved so much within my own psychedelic journey, and by psychedelic, I don't necessarily mean just the times in which I've been connecting with psychedelics, but I mean the glimpses behind the veil they've given me as to how life itself is a psychedelic experience, right? Some of my favorite things within that have been being able to connect with other individuals like yourself and see myself reflected in them. And, I think that's one of the best gifts that psychedelics have given me. And we talked about this on your show, how we think we would have been best pals in high school because we liked a lot of the same things. And that Bob Marley poster you have behind you, dude, I had that on my wall for years, man. Like I didn't even interact with cannabis yet. I was like 13. I found it at Dappy or Spencer's, one or the other, the cool store with the black lights. I found it. It spoke to me. I put it on my wall. Little did I know it was a premonition as to what was to come. And so I'd love to hear, with you getting into, cannabis, other plant medicines, et cetera, what was the initial call for you that got you into these things, right? Like, were you would just say no kid for a while with DARE program? Did you never believe it? Like, what was that trajectory like? I love getting into this.
Yeah, thank you. And I could remember similar feelings of like magnetism towards Bob Marley and his imagery. And I had, similar to your poster, I had a t-shirt with Bob Marley on it way before I ever even considered he had anything to do with weed. So, because at that age, I was definitely straight edge up until Like, and I don't know how far straight edge has made its way into the world, but as an East Coast guy, you probably have your memories of people saying I'm straight edge, right? That was a high school thing.
I got friends with the tattoos still, you know, I'm like,
wow,
that didn't end up the way you wanted it
to. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, I remember being really resistant to it because I had experienced a party atmosphere within my family, never to the point where, you know, anything illegal or like abusive was going on. I never felt like I was in an environment that was unsafe. You know, it was just the general sort of gluttony of alcohol, and occasionally there'd be this odor in the house, and I never knew what it was, but it probably tickled something inside of me because, you know, eventually I was prodded by my buddies to smoke. And being a pretty against the grain person, I said no, because here was a crowd of people all subscribing to the same idea and belief. I had to be contrarian. I really alienated myself from that friend group, kind of regretted that for like a few years in high school. But then another friend group did the same thing, said, hey, you should smoke. And knowing what that rejection was like on the second time around, I sort of considered it, but I had more in my world at that time to justify it. I had seen Bruce Lee writing about cannabis. I had seen Eddie Bravo smoking bongs and rolling jiu-jitsu. And as a young wrestling, you know, athlete, I was a wrestler and a martial artist. I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize my success in that sport. So to find out that, on the contrary, cannabis might actually aid, at the very least, in the recovery from it, I was just so interested. And I had already been interested in martial arts for non-traditional reasons, in the sense that, like, you know, at that time, maybe a lot of people would have seen UFC and said, oh, I want to do that. Me, yes, I was a fan of UFC, but I had this spiritual approach to martial arts. I understood the philosophical concepts that went along with it. And I came at it. I wasn't like a 7-year-old karate student. You know, my parents didn't put me in. I told my parents, I'm like, listen, I got in a fight at school. I want to go to martial arts. I want to learn how to fight. And my dad was like, of course. Yeah, of course. Let's do this. So, you know, I always had like a very sort of like determined, disciplined approach to it, which didn't carry over into any other part of my life. Okay. I should say that martial arts was probably the only thing that I was disciplined about at that age. So cannabis kind of added a whole nother level to it, because I eventually, you know, caved in. I smoked with my friends. I didn't feel anything, and I liked it. And I remember watching like a comedy show too, where these people were smoking a blunt on TV. You know, I'd never seen that before. And I was like, oh, wow, that actually looks fun. The Workaholics, 10 seasons later, I've probably seen every episode. So that was 5 years ago, me. But anyways, Workaholics was a big, big deal when I was in high school. It was sort of a part of that like push over the edge. And then, yeah, last but not least, I mean, the idea that a plant consciousness could speak to me became really important. And I was reading about that in books about shamanism and anthropology, but I didn't understand at all what it meant until I actually had the experience myself. And I, you know, smoked out of a bong with my friends, got incredibly high, just sort of let my whole guard down, and was just saying everything that came to mind, and which caused my friends to laugh. I just really enjoyed being like that social side of me that I'd never experienced, because I was always very shy, very reserved, very careful, which was probably what got me into fights, because when I, you know, popped off, people didn't expect it.
Yes.
When I made a joke, people didn't expect it. So a lot of influences. And, you know, Bruce Lee, his Tao of Jeet Kune Do kind of centered me in that philosophical, like, what martial arts was actually worth, rather than if you just saw UFC, you might think like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a cool job. You could be like a celebrity or something if you become really good at this. It never was about that for me. It was more about, oh, I know I have this adversity in my life. This is something that's going to be another skill, another tool, so that I don't have to face that adversity anymore. I don't have to face the fear of what are other people going to do to me, you know? And I think once you experience that, I know this isn't a martial arts podcast, so I'll be brief on this point, but when you experience that confidence in your physical space, it's like a drug. It's like a psychedelic. It's a freeing
100%.
thing. And, you know, I hear comedians say this sometimes, like that guy looks like he needs to get punched in the face or something. And I don't commend violence on anybody. The opposite. I would defend somebody from getting hit in the face. But there is a certain truth to that. Like, some people have never experienced any physical adversity, so they treat others in a way that is really, really obvious that they're not reflecting much on how they feel, you know, how they're making others feel, right? So
Yeah.
Martial arts centered me in like a type of caring for others that I don't know if other sports could have given me that appreciation for. And then cannabis, with psychedelics kind of coming a few years later, they definitely broaden that into a like, oh, not only do I need to figure out, you know, how to defend myself from how the world's trying to kill me and other people are trying to kill me, but there is like a whole other subsection of that they're trying to keep from us, you know, from learning about. Yes. And that's contributing to this dilemma. So maybe I sound incredibly paranoid to your average listener who isn't into conspiracies, but it's very much a part of the same sort of braided thread for me.
100%. And I think people will love this because I love entertaining every single conspiracy theory, because here's the thing. What separates a theory from a conspiracy theory? And this is something that I've really thought about a lot. I'm not conspiring for anything when I'm looking into these theories. I'm doing it to stretch what I think I know about the world, because what I've realized, and I think I say this in your outro, but what I've realized is that what psychedelics have taught me, and cannabis was the first one and the one that's still my biggest teacher in this, is to question every single thing that other people tell us about the world, because they might have the purest of intention and they might really believe something about the world that really helps them have the best experience of life possible. But I think one of the biggest traps in today's world, and I don't know if you looked into Paul Levy's work at all with Wetiko, spelling Wetiko and things like that.
The last group of books that came to my house, his book Wetiko was in that package. Psychic. Yes.
And it's so powerful, because what is Wetiko? In my eyes, one of the main ways to look at it as the mind virus is allowing people to tell you what is true about life. And I think that one of the things that you were talking about that works perfectly here with regards to, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. I think it's just business, that if we start thinking about these things much more in depth, then guess what we start realizing? Oh, we're whole without having to have the nicest house. We're whole without having to have the nicest car. All we need is some quality relationships and a nice fire, maybe some good smoke. And that's all we need. I think that's really bad for business. And so I don't think it's necessarily conspiracy, like they're trying to, you know, keep us in this evil state or anything. Who knows? Maybe there is, right? And maybe there's a little deeper. But I think the most basic way that I understand it is just like, that's not exactly good for business if we're not looking to, I mean, look what happened over the pandemic, right? The pandemic was almost a sober psychedelic experience for many people, where they started realizing, I could die tomorrow. Why the hell am I working at this job? I don't want to work here anymore. And now there's all this problem in the workforce where people don't want to do these mundane jobs anymore. It's very similar to like a shared psychedelic experience that happened in the sober state of reality. And so I think we're really onto something here where, you know, it makes sense. And, you know, I can say from my own experience is that, I mean, interacting with psychedelics has really allowed me to really ask myself what quality of life truly means to me. And it's not measured in how many things I own or what I, you know, do, but who I be. And so I love that you brought that up, because cannabis was the first plant for me. And still, like I said, the one that continues to help me every time I sit with it, you know, to really question and go, hey, you know, I'm not looking to prove someone wrong because of what I believe, but I'm here to say, well, I believe this. And have someone else go, I believe this, and go, cool, let's have a discussion about it. not in the sense that either one of us is trying to change one another's minds, but also with the complete awareness that, hey, if Mark says something to me right now that I might not have believed before, but it sounds cooler for me, I'm taking that on into my life, because why not, right? I think that we all, through Paul Levy's other book, The Quantum Revelation, which is a fantastic book, it speaks about how there is no subject and object separation. So what that means is that through quantum physics, they're proving through a scientific type method, which is completely different than the Newtonian Cartesian way of looking at things. They're proving what spirituality and teachers in ancient texts have been speaking about for years, which is we create our own reality. And so I think that one of the things that psychedelics have done for me so beautifully is to allow me to have the direct experience of that notion. And it's so powerful.
And that is a much more brilliant way of phrasing it than I probably would. But as you were expressing that, I realized maybe I put the cart before the horse, and I wanted to say something that I forgot to say. So before, I kind of described like how I was straight edge and I didn't think cannabis was useful. I thought it was bad. Mm-hmm. The experience of being high by myself brought upon so much wonder that I was just like, well, if they lied to me about this, they must be lying about everything. And yes, unfortunately for the crowd of people, for those of you, maybe not unfortunately, I'll take that prerequisite out, but for those of you who don't smoke, that might sound a little weird. And then the inverse, for those of you who don't mess with conspiracy theories, it's probably a little concerning. Like, all these people who are smoking weed are also going to come up with these crazy theories. Well, hey, here's an antidote for that. Stop lying to us about this stuff. And you won't create a bunch of paranoid people who then go and question everything, right? Yes. Because, I think Plato or Aristotle or one of these guys who has their head carved onto a piece of stone in a museum somewhere said, question everything, right? So cannabis sort of put me in that place of like question everything. Now, LSD and psychedelics, MDMA, which I remember from our conversation, you mentioned MDMA, right? And
yes,
I never even consider this a part of my psychedelic experiences. It happened really early on. It was like right out of high school. These girls I was hanging out with were really into that stuff. And being an 18-year-old dude, I was really into them and whatever they were doing. Yes. So I took some of it, and I had a scooter at the time. And
was it a motor scooter?
Yes.
Dude, and tell me it was a GoPed. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
It was the kind you sit on, like the older style ones that were they've been around for like 5 years. Not any of the new ones that you see in cities where people are standing. Not one of those.
Gotcha. Because I had a motor scooter too. So we'll have to talk about that in a different subject because I am fascinated. So sorry.
No. And this thing was cool too. I painted a magical emblem on the front of it.
But sick.
I remember singing as I'm driving my scooter, and people sing in their car. I don't know many people that sing at the top of their lungs on a motorcycle or a scooter. That's like you're on display for the whole world.
Yes.
But I was just so in the moment and so like in love with music in that moment. And I remember feeling really, really hyper thinking, like somebody took the speed of my thought process and turned it up times 16. And that made me really uncomfortable. And that made me really wary of ever doing anything synthetic, chemical, laboratory produced ever again. So that kind of stops right there. And I don't have many psychedelic experiences until my buddy gets acid, what we thought was acid.
Oh,
But
yikes.
in hindsight, I really think it was probably a research chemical because it kind of just like slowed us down, made us a little delirious, made us sort of, and me, I felt the most of it because my buddies, they probably did one of these on me. But for those just listening, I put my finger over my shoulder instead of my tongue. But yeah, I remember just sort of walking on the beach and feeling really, really tired and not at all, So I had these like odd psychedelic experiences that weren't quite psychedelic, and it really was more of an uncomfortable trial, if anything. So that left me really wanting an organic experience. So the first time that mushrooms were ever sort of around, I was able to procure some, and and I happened to be on a sort of a retreat, a work retreat. I was a canvasser at the time, and you know what? I'm putting the cart before the horse again. So the first time I did mushrooms, it was a chocolate truffle, and I mean, it was like inward. And I don't remember anything I experienced. That's the thing about mushrooms is I do notice how my personality has evolved after each mushroom experience, but it hasn't been until maybe the last 3, which have happened sporadically over the past 5 years. I really don't use psychedelics that frequently. But it was very inward, and I really, I can't explain what was happening, but if I had to guess, I would say my higher self was intervening because things started to get progressively better in my life. And the track that I was heading down started to sort of make an upward trajectory curve into me being a more responsible person, being more financially capable of taking care of myself and all that stuff. Because at that time, when I was working the canvassing job, I was living in a fraternity house, fresh off of a award-winning run as a delivery driver. I was the best delivery driver this Chinese food restaurant had ever seen. And I was so good that I ruined my Forester, my Subaru Forester, just from, grinding the engine, the gears, and working 6 days a week. So I was a little, screwed out of college, no degree because I dropped out, and I was hanging out at a fraternity house, which, I'm not in college anymore. So what business do I have there? But these were sort of outlaws, outliers, if you will. And not everybody that was in this fraternity was a member of the college. So I was actually sort of welcomed in and went through the initiation, the Animal House antics and all that. But this became like a safe space. And if it wasn't for that safe space, I don't know if I would have like had these really powerful psychedelic experiences. Because at home, yeah, I could lock myself in my room at night, but like there's no pulling off a psychedelic trip when you're living with your mom and dad, you know, like, unless you're pulling an all-nighter, which I did that. And I freaked my dad out because he wakes up at 4 a.m. and I came down to get a snack and he's like, why are you up right now? Like usually you're falling asleep at this hour. And I'm like more awake than him. So this place became like a safe space. And that's where the really constructive experiences happened. And one of them that was like the most memorable, and I've been talking a lot, so maybe I'll let you ask a question.
This is beautiful.
Before.
I love this.
So the most memorable of all of my experiences with acid and mushrooms, which I could probably only count on 2 hands, but it's foggy, understandably so. It started with a candle meditation. And I've been reading about the occult. I've been reading about all kinds of stuff. And my friends all thought I was crazy. Like, why are you even reading all these books? Like, you don't even go to school anymore, like, but I was reading the Tree of Life. I was reading, about the ancient pyramids. I was reading about the secret doctrine and just trying to fill in the gaps, from the indoctrination, all the holes that they leave you with. So I start with the candle meditation in our basement, which was haunted. There's a ghost that lived in one of the closets, and I made sure it was pitch black. I spent about 30-45 minutes just trying to put my consciousness inside of each center of it wasn't something that I had ever done on a psychedelic trip before, but I had tried this meditation a couple times where you just sort of chant a different tone that corresponds with each of your chakras. Mm-hmm. And while you do that, you sort of center your awareness in that place in your body. So I tried that because, you put this in your system, you sort of get a little excited. You want to plan these things ahead of time. Me, I've never been the best at planning. So I kind of pulled this one out of my repertoire. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to walk up this mountain. And if anybody's ever been to New Haven and you're listening to this, which maybe, because we're sort of centric to the New England area, so maybe, New Haven has 2 stone cliffs that just sort of jut out of nowhere. You can see them if you're in the middle of the city. There's East Rock and West Rock, and they're these red rocks. There's red bare-faced cliffs, and they're not, they're hills. If you live in the Rocky Mountains or the Appalachians, you'd call these hills, but they're big compared to most of the coastline. You don't typically have a mountain that tall right next to the coastline. So I go up to this place, and pretty steep. It's like there are ways to get to the top of the mountain that aren't steep, but I had a sort of rite of passage that I was on, a self-induced rite of passage. So I ran, for the most part, as far as I could up this like incredibly steep trail until I was exhausted. And then I as a martial artist, I can push myself to that state of exhaustion. It's not comfortable. It's not how I like to spend my day, but I felt the technique of it was more important. Mm-hmm. And man, the head rush that I felt was incredible. And I had to stop and like say to myself, like, oh, wow, okay, like you could fall off this cliff now because you're pretty high up now. So I didn't keep running, but I made my way up. And by then I had winded myself. So it was pretty exhausting to get to the top. And that second head rush of feeling like, oh, my feet are on flat ground again was incredible. So, people who are like me and they like to go out in nature and be in the woods, like there's a whole nother dimension to these plant medicines when you're in their environment. And being in New England, I don't think that many psychedelics are endogenous to here other than cannabis maybe can grow endogenously. Mm-hmm. But like the psilocybin mushrooms is too cold for them. I don't know.
Yeah. Amanitas, I think, grow in some places, but honestly, I've never felt the call to engage with amanitas just because of the experiences I've heard. But I think they do grow endogenously here in certain places.
Yeah, I've heard that the secret with that is that you have to ferment milk and put the fermented mushrooms in milk. But I'm not an expert. But my thought bringing that up is, I'd wonder how amplified that would have been if I was in the plant medicine's natural environment, because I already felt so connected to the land just through place of birth, and then through this setting and experience of this plant in my system, my consciousness sharing the cup with me, so to speak. Now I get to the top, I venture around. This is midday. And I'm just hiking around the woods with no intention of going back. Just, I'm going to stay up there as long as I can. And I sit down on this really tall rock that's a cliff, but it's not a cliff like the one I climbed up. It's like a cliff over a little valley. that's on top of this mountain. And it's sort of 20 feet up. And I'm like really centering, trying to just be in my breath. And as I'm doing that, a buck, a deer, a male deer with antlers, and probably like it was an old boy. You can tell when their antlers get to a certain size, like they've had antlers for a certain amount of seasons. So he's looking at me like, what's this rock? And I'm looking at him like, whoa. And when you're breathing in your center, you're calm, and I'm just trying to be as still as possible, which was easier with the psychedelics. I think I would have been more like quick to pull my phone out or something that would have scared it if I wasn't in that state of mind. But that was incredible because, just being that close to any living animal from that state of mind is powerful. But that particular animal spoke to me on like a omen sort of spirit animal level. I had a friend at the time who's a Native American who kind of corresponded and concurred with that thought that like, yeah, there might be some significance there. And he had been sort of helping me understand all this from that point in time when I dropped out of college. I had known him and we had smoked together, and sort of gave me a deeper understanding of more than a book could, of like what a plant's consciousness actually was and why you should respect it, et cetera, et cetera. So I did always have a sort of like reverence for these experiences that I think I can't not mention it, because it's for people listening who might want to like inspire to do their thing however they do their thing. That's important. That's probably the most important thing, is the intention and the amount of respect you have for what you're about to do. And I took it so seriously. I was in a house full of like other same aged guys who were probably taking the same stuff, but the difference was they would stay in the house, they would turn the music up to 100, or they would put a crazy movie on, or they would drink beer, or and all of these things that created a situation that they're still alive, they're fine, they're human beings. But I would say, from our perspective of living in this alternative space, if you want to manifest, these are sort of not going to be like a shortcut to manifesting your dreams, but they're going to reveal the obstacles that are in your way, and I say that because people are always looking for a quick fix, and I was looking for a quick fix. But because I was a martial artist, I understood that to be good at something, it takes time, and to be great at something, it takes a lot of time. And, I was hoping to be great at life. I want to get paid in the shade and not have to work. You have to be pretty great to avoid that, the humdrum economic hustle that, especially living where we both live, it's a lot more challenging. It's not like either of us were born on a family farm or something like that, so it's definitely a way out of the system if you know how to use it as a tool. And now this podcast, I think the one that I've done for almost since 2020, is proof positive. I mean, if I was on my podcast for this amount of time and I had received maybe the same amount of listeners the whole time, I don't know, maybe I would give up and do something else. But the response that people have to the show is telling me that not only are you onto something, not only are you not crazy, not only is your family probably wrong, but there's a reason why we're all responding to this, because it's not indigenous to me. I'm just a good communicator, and I have an instinct of what to do and what to learn. And when I speak on the podcast, people tell me they like to hear it. So, but all of that wouldn't have happened if I didn't take this serious approach to self-improvement. And psychedelics can kind of push you to that brink of like life or death too, at some points, where you really contemplate like, what is my purpose here? And I had those experiences. They're probably harder to recall and harder to retell. But as I'm like saying all this other stuff, they're sort of fading in and out. And there was some really weird, sort of moments where it was like, I'm not going to just, like you have to, like, I would just be talking to myself, like, I'm not just going to like settle for that, because there's this feeling inside of like, oh, maybe my dad's right. I should just go be a plumber or an electrician or something. Like, yeah, just sell the books, what are they good for, but that's not who I am. And that's the opposite of how I feel. If you couldn't sense my sarcasm there, folks, don't worry. Keep your money in your pockets. These books are mine. I'm not selling them anytime soon. And that's the thing, though, is there's so much info out there, and so many people were like me, a delivery guy who chose that job. This is kind of after a lot of my psychedelic experiences, but I chose that job specifically because I could listen to podcasts and get paid. And I was re-educating myself. And now I have a really cool opportunity to help other people educate themselves and get out of the matrix. So I think psychedelics were pivotal, an intricate and inextricable part of that process.
What is up, everybody? I hope you are all enjoying the show, and I wanted to stop by real quick and share a little bit about our latest podcast sponsor, Freedom Builders. Now, Freedom Builders are a team of graphic designers, website creators, videographers, social media marketing experts, and coaches that build out your custom online business from A to Z. This is a done-for-you service, which means they do the work for you while you get to put your focus back on what you love most, which is coaching your clients and bringing in sales. Now, as a former online fitness coach, Mike knows where your struggle points are and exactly how to help you overcome them. This is why he created Freedom Builders, so that you can scale your business while protecting your time and your energy. Now, you guys know that delegation is a business superpower, and you can activate this superpower today by scheduling a complimentary call with Mike at freedombuilders.com, so you can start building the freedom that allows you to take your business to the next level. Alex and I recently connected with Freedom Builders for our Connect with Cannabis build-out, and we could not have been happier with the results. With Mike and his team, they were able to go through an outline and create a personalized program for our experience, develop our brand identity, build and design a custom branded webpage, professionally edit our program video content, custom design all of our slide presentations, automate our email marketing sequences, create a seamless payment system for our offer, design unique infographics for our social media content, and guide us through our proven launch blueprint to generate organic leads through our social media. So if you're a coach, facilitator, or healer listening to this ad right now, and you are looking to put freedom back into your life, once again, go to freedombuilders.com and book your complimentary call today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm wishing you the best day ever. I love that, man. That was so beautiful. And, it's so fun podcasting with other podcasters because, first of all, we always have amazing equipment, but second of all, we always know how to speak. You know what I mean? Like, I have amazing guests on, but every once in a while, someone will tell me like, how much do I speak? How much do I not speak? And I'm sure you've had that with guests as well. And so it's so amazing to be able to have these deep dives with other podcasters too, because, not only that, but I also see myself reflected in you in many different ways. Not only did we listen to similar music, right? Did we not both have motor scooters, which I think is really crazy, but we also both started our podcast in 2020. And mine specifically happened after an MDMA ceremony in Las Vegas at a strip club, right? The last place you would think that you were going to have an awakening. But I was out in Las Vegas with my girlfriend. We went to a cannabis convention out there because we were both working in the industry. And similar to you, I started working in cannabis because it was calling me. I was like, I need to do this. And I got into it for, let's just say, different reasons than the company that took us over. They got into it. Like my reasons were like, I want to help people. I want to spread the message of this plant. And I want to ensure that I'm educating people on how to use this plant consciously and intentionally, not because it's the right way to use it, but specifically because I had the direct experience that when I interacted with it this way, the plant opened up a lot more opportunities for me to, have self-discovery, self-awareness, etc. So I knew it wasn't going to be everyone's path, but I'm like, hey, certain people, right? Like me or you are, and I imagine most people listening to this podcast, I'm like, they got questions. I have what I would call answers, but not answers. They're just like what I've gotten to at this point, but like, and so I started working there, and throughout the next 3 years, I had an amazing experience. And then another company took us over. It was a bunch of, let's just say, Chads and Brads. I don't know how else to say it, but a certain archetype. And it started smelling like office supplies in that place, real quick. I was like, this smells like a Staples, and that smell when you walk into a Staples and you're just like, man, this is the most boring smell I've ever smelled in my life.
Yeah.
That
like
smell.
Whiteboard eraser.
Yeah, dude. Like reams of paper and whiteboard erasers, just like not the smells I want for 500, please, but so I went to Las Vegas to go to this convention to find investors so we could start our own business and blah, blah, blah. We went there. All we found was more of the same suit and tie type. How many grams per square foot can you get me? What bloom boosters do you use? I'm like, this place is a fucking nightmare. So last night, or the second to last night, I asked her, I'm like, hey, we're both feeling kind of beat up, in terms of like, man, this kind of sucks. We thought we were going to come out here and find investors, and we went into the belly of the beast. And so I asked her, I said, what do you want to do? It's our second to last night here. She's like, can we go to a strip club? Because neither of us had ever been before. So I was like, hell yeah. Like, I'll say yes to that. Like, I'll take things every guy wants their girlfriend to say for 500, please. I'm like, I'm taking this opportunity. So we go and we take MDMA and we have an absolute blast. So at the end of that, I had this experience where basically MDMA showed me through a series of events, which I won't draw it out. I've already told it on the podcast, but through a series of events, it allowed me to really take a look at my relationship with cannabis. And at that point, I realized, I'm numbing out with cannabis unconsciously to work through this job that I don't like anymore. And it hadn't always been that way, but I'd started doing it and just hadn't noticed it. So I went home, I took a 3-month break from cannabis. During that time, I was accessing more of my higher self, like you were saying. Everything was coming online. I was crying to music playing. I was like reading books and just like having my whole world blow up. And it was really like when you break through in a 5-gram mushroom experience and like everything is there, all the answers to all the questions you've ever had. It was like that was happening in a sober state. And so I started my podcast, had no idea what I wanted to do on it, but just was following my heart. And so I really love that idea that you were speaking about as to how you got into podcasting and how psychedelics influenced it. And, one of the things that I'll say also is, because I know that you love conspiracies and I love conspiracies. And I imagine, do you watch Gaia at all? I imagine you probably have watched Gaia at some point in your life, right?
Yeah, I've seen it. My girlfriend and I, we bought a subscription to it to watch Freddie Silva's documentaries a while back, but we just did like the first month, I think.
You're blowing my mind, bro. No way did you just mention Freddie Silva. So I watched this show, Open Minds. I think the host is amazing. Like Game Recognized Game. Oh my God. Yes, dude. He was on there. I found out about him through there. I just watched his documentary called The Missing Gods, and it's unbelievable. I don't know if you've seen it on Gaia, but it's an amazing. Yeah, it's so good. And his episode on Open Minds is really good too. But through there, I found out about Patrick Flanagan, the guy who believes he was Nikola Tesla in a past life. And the stories he has are wild, building Tesla coils in the 40s at age 7, just out of like, ham radio parts and stuff. On Gaia, there's this show called Galactic Messages, which is these channeled messages from the Taigetans, which are an interstellar race, surrounding the whole idea of why so many people right now are starting to resonate with things like you and I like talking about, right? Because for a long time, everyone was like, yeah, whatever, dude, about spirituality. And now I have friends that I would never expect would reach out to me being like, hey, man, I'm starting to feel this call to like reach out to you about this thing. I don't even know where to begin. And I imagine you've been having similar things too, where you're just noticing, like you were saying, like, hey, I started this podcast because I loved it, but now people are really catching on. And it's like, why are so many people more interested in this stuff now? Well, this theory says that, and for anyone listening, this might be pretty wild. Go check out Galactic Messages, come to your own conclusions, right? But what the Taigetans say is that way back in the day, there was a war between the Galactic Federation, which Mystery School talks a whole lot about, and the Draconians. And basically, both forces took a huge hit. And basically, after that, the Draconians were trying to come to Earth. And the Galactic Federation was like, we got to prevent them from getting there. And so some of them had already landed on Earth. And so what happened was the Galactic Federation went to the moon and they built these 10 quantum supercomputers that cast a matrix within the matrix. So 5D has its own matrix, aka set of laws that are agreed upon to be able to play this game. But then 3D is only around Earth. And so once you go through the Van Allen belt, you're out of 3D. And so it's this illusion that's cast upon Earth. But the reason they did it was to trap the Draconians here and keep them powerless. But yet, over the last 12,500 years since they built these computers, they were supposed to go back and work on them. They only recently started going back. So basically 8 out of the 12 have failed now. So the matrix is actually lifting. 3D is starting to change. And that's why now you're seeing more Sasquatch sightings and, ghosts and all of these things start happening, the abductions and all of this stuff, because according to this theory, the matrix is literally like the illusion of it is ending because the quantum supercomputers that are casting it are dying out. And so I don't know if you heard that theory, but it's a fascinating theory. And I love the show Galactic Messages because it breaks a lot of this stuff down, the power of belief. But, again, I love learning about stuff like this, not because I know that it's true. I don't know anything, right? But it's so fun to realize, to have the direct experience. And this psychedelics did this for me, that the biggest thirst trap in life is when society says that your worth is what you know, when in reality, there's no way to know anything other than I am, the universal truth, right? That we are, and that's it. Not that we're men, women, whatever. It's just we are. We're our energy. We're here. And so for me, anytime that I can hear something that stretches my comfort zone and stretches and allows me to realize, oh, I guess I didn't know that. And even if I do think I know it, I still don't know it until I know it. And when I think I know it, I still don't know it. It's a cyclical process that it really transformed for me. And I was able to flip the script and realize, oh my God, the best part of life, the part that I get highest on, is how much I don't know. Because when I don't know anything, everything is a mystery. Everything is magic. And personally, I just choose to believe and live my life that way because I've tried it both ways and I like this way more. And that's what I tell people. You can live life however you want. You want to believe there's no magic in the world? Hey, more power to you. I've just done it both ways and I choose this one because it's much more fun. And so I love that you brought that up, man, because, my podcasting journey is very similar based around psychedelics. I love getting into conspiracies. One of the funny things that some guy I got connected with, a fellow Mark, my buddy Mark England, he loves conspiracies as well. My buddy Eddie does. And I remember one of the similarities, once my buddy Adam Chin, who's Mark's business partner, had met Eddie, he was like, oh my God, Mark and Eddie are going to get along amazing because they both fall asleep to conspiracy theories at night. And that was like the funniest thing I had ever heard. But it's amazing, man. It's so much fun chatting with you and being like, wow, we're very similar in a lot of ways. And I'm curious, have you done your human design before at all?
No, but you're gonna get your mind blown again, because I was just talking to Ben and Joe from the UFO Garage podcast about the Draconians last night. So,
dude,
reading my mind.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah. No, I haven't done a human design. What's that?
So essentially the story is that this guy, like, where astrology and the I Ching and these things and tarot have been around for millennia, right? Human design was channeled in the 90s or somewhere around there by this guy, Ra Aru-Utu, I believe his name was. I might have butchered that, but he channeled it. And it took him about 10 years to put all this together. But essentially what he believes he channeled was that if the earth is a living being and it's our God, right? It's our God in this 3D to 5D reality, right? We're living on this planet is sentient, et cetera, then the earth, being the creator of all of us, has a design for how each thing is made. So for instance, like part of the hardware for humans is that we have 2 legs, we have 2 arms, right? But in terms of how our psychology works, that's a little bit different amongst certain people. And so there were these universal principles in the design, and there are these very subjective principles in the design. And so when you put in your birth date, your birth time, et cetera, your birth country, everything, it essentially gives you a snapshot in time as to when you were born and what your personality patterns are and everything. And I would bet my bottom dollar that you have a 1 in your design, and I would even bet that you might be a 5-1 like I am, because I just see a lot of similarities between us, where 5s are the heretics. So they'll question everything because they want to not believe anything unless they believe it. They have to have the experience of it to believe it. They're also guides, mentors, et cetera, et cetera. They're teachers. And the 1s are the investigator. So they need to know everything about everything. Now, how you liberate that is realizing that you'll never know anything about anything, and that the real fun is investigating and realizing you don't know it. And, it's very interesting because out of astrology and all these things that I think have a lot of credibility to them, something about human design just struck me very deeply. And so I think you would really take a liking to it. Super fun.
Yeah, it sounds like something that I've probably seen on the internet and maybe done, if it's like answer a few questions and get an answer. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. I remember having the number 8 life number. And then I also know my natal chart stuff. But yeah, no, I'd be interested in that for sure.
Yeah, if you know your birth time, your birth date, etc. Basically, birth time is the only one that most people don't know. I know because my mom said it to me constantly throughout my life. You were born at 327 on 328. So, like, literally, as soon as they ask me, I'm like, I got this answer. I know this one like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, man. And I'd be curious to see if you're a projector as well, because projectors, that's what I am. We use our voice, like, usually out of all of the centers in our body, because when you look up your free chart, it'll tell you some stuff and you'll be able to gain some information right off the bat. But there's so many levels to it that go in deeper. And my closed or defined centers are my throat, my third eye, and my crown. So what that means is that I don't have a defined sense of self. So I can chameleon a little bit when I'm around different groups of people and just not change my personality, but I just flow with anyone else's energy. I also don't have a root chakra filled in. So my emotions are a little bit less overarching, if that makes sense, or less overwhelming. Overwhelming is not the right word, because I don't mean to say that people that have that are overwhelming with emotion, but they know their emotions really well. For me, I'm like, I don't know if I feel emotions sometimes, and then I feel them and then I don't sometimes. So I'm curious for you because, usually people with a defined throat, we have podcasts, we're speakers, etc. So it's very interesting, man. It's It's curiosity provoking.
Yeah. No, I've had a friend of mine who's been on my podcast before, Laura Lenhard. She has a shop in Connecticut. Hold on, a motorcycle's passing. Oh, it's gone. All right, sorry.
Isn't that the worst, man?
A loud road. So
yeah, same dude, right here.
Yeah, I'll get some soundproof stuff for the window there eventually. Yeah. But yeah, so Laura did a chakra tuning test with me the first time I ever went into her shop. It's called Talisman and Cauldron. It's in Derby, Connecticut. But yeah, really, really opening at that point in my life. Like I said before, cannabis and psychedelics kind of opened up my personality. I was kind of reserved, shy, for really no reason, because everybody, I'm 6'8", so everybody tries to talk to me wherever I go.
6'5" too, so I feel it.
Yeah, especially at times when you're like, okay, all right, no, I don't play basketball. But
I had a nickel for every time I was asked that question. I'd be rich.
So that mixed with this sort of martial arts again, I've definitely experienced a sort of clarity in that. Okay, so yeah, my throat chakra definitely was a part of that session. Like, she noticed a lot of energy there, but the third eye was where all the energy was. And I don't know what it is, man. I mean, I just sort of fuel my third eye all the time. And I'm still, maybe not ready to do that transition to less cannabis in my daily intake, but I could see that's on the horizon because, you can only burn a candle so bright until you lose all the wax. So I need to, just maybe slow things down a little bit, but I credit a lot of my intuition to cannabis. I've always told people, like, listen, you just need to connect with who you are inside. That's the most important thing I use to learn this information. Like, I'll pick up a book and I'll read 8 chapters of it. That's not going to be 1 through 8. That might be chapter 4, chapter 7, and then every chapter after chapter 7, because I'm like, oh, this is the part of the book I needed. But that's also why I really love nonfiction. It saves you some time. But I'm always investigating, but whether I have answers, I'm kind of, I'll go back to what you were saying earlier about the channeling stuff. Like, much as I've received a lot of great advice from those sources, that's not the first source I give someone. If I tell them, like, well, if I'm trying to make a case for something, like if somebody were to argue that cannabis isn't useful, you and I both can probably cite many reasons why they're wrong. Whereas if somebody were to tell me no, channeling, I would totally just back off and be like, yeah, sure. Because I think it's such a personal thing.
It is.
That it only speaks to people who are on that path ready. But I also say that too, knowing that there are many people who take advantage of that. So I'm always very cautious about channeling and talking about that as like a source of mine, because I know I could lead people astray potentially. Like I've read the book Urantia, the Urantia book, and it's a very interesting book, especially considering it was channeled in the 1850s. And they talk about the Galactic Federation. They talk about this huge group of people in other galaxies. And the names of these places are so distinct that you would almost have to like run it through. I think now that we have the technology with like bots to determine with AI, like if something is human syntax, like we need to like examine the Urantia book and figure out like, can we prove that this was not written by someone, just off the top of their head? Because that would be, an amazing piece of evidence against, those who say channeling is all bullshit. But that being said, there's a cult run by a guy named Gabriel who uses the book, the Urantia. He didn't write the book. He just found the book. He became a devotee of the book, and he became so devoted to the book that now he's able to impress people with his recall, and that has given him this sort of power to run a little cult. So that's where I'm like very interested in this stuff as what it says to the overall piece of the puzzle. Where does everything fit in? Because it's oftentimes never one way, and it's never just black and white. There are many grays, many shades of in between. And like, how do you account for that? An inspiring work that maybe was potentially channeled through these beings then gets repurposed for some madman's cultish ideology, right? So
Yeah.
it's a twisted system at that point, but it doesn't take away from the truth possibly that it was there originally. And I mean, what does that say in a broader sense about most of our religions? Everything gets taken and used politically. Cannabis taken away from its sacred position and used politically for years, right? So I think that's kind of where I started and where I come back to every time is like consciousness. No matter what it is, like even JFK. I mean, my shirt says alien shot JFK, but there are alchemical perspectives to that whole conspiracy theory, which, maybe not the right show for that topic, but if
I love diving into those things.
Well, maybe RFK. We could do an episode on RFK because there was that whole thing where he got spiked with LSD. I think that the story, somebody tried to like hurt him by poisoning him, and they spiked his drink with LSD and he fell out of a window or something like that. I don't remember the whole story.
That's wild.
Yeah. But it's, it's definitely a touchy situation too. Because like I've received so much insight from LSD, but when you look at who was responsible for like it coming to America and being implemented the way it was, seems like the CIA to me. So like things are so dualistic, right? And I think maybe there's a component of that to bring it to astrology, because you kind of mentioned, I mentioned the natal chart, but when it comes to the age of Pisces, which we're leaving, think about that. That's a dual sign. There's two fish revolving around each other. Now we're heading into this age of Aquarius, where it's like water is being poured, right? This water is being poured on everything. And what happens when you pour water into maybe like a dirty bowl or something? The dirt eventually is basically like, sifted out. It makes the water really foggy and gross. And if you keep adding water, there reaches a point where the dirt is all gone, right? So I think we're almost coming to a purifying point, and that water is our spirit, it's consciousness, it's truth, it's creator, however you choose to define that, total absolute, that I am, right? That's coming into the play, the picture at this point in time. So I don't even know if we necessarily need the XYZ Aryans, whoever they are, from whichever star system to tell us this. Because if we just take our 2 feet on the ground and look up, we can see what's going on. We've tracked the ages. We know from the Mayans to the Chinese to the Jewish, and we see that, we see these mass shifts of human consciousness with the changing of the cycles. So I think, the fact that we have plant medicine at our disposal the way we do now is evidence of that.
100%. And I think that, I heard someone speak about this, and I think it's one of the best ways that I've heard plant medicines, like, what's their purpose? Because I asked that to myself a lot. I'm like, why are they here? And of course, like, what answer comes to me is much more of a feeling of just a reassurance that I do know. And by know, I mean believe what I choose to believe is why they're here. But one of the things that someone said was, they are here because, like, undoubtedly, whoever our the supreme creator is, recognize that we would go through times in which we would take the magic out of life, live more Newtonian, think there's no magic, forget who we are, all of these things. And yet, how are you going to stamp out things that grow from shit or grow through cement, right? There's no way you're going to stamp all of that out. Psychedelics had to be hardy like that because the supreme being would also know that as these medicines started getting out there, the powers that be at that point would try to stamp them out. And by the time they realized that, like, oh, these are actually really, like, high quality and they can help with PTSD and all of these things, and now science is showing, we wouldn't want them stamped out, right? If they were something that was really rare and then we had to, and then people tried to stamp them out, they'd be gone forever. And so what I really think is that this age of Aquarius is, they talk about the second coming of Christ and all of these types of things, but I don't think that metaphor, because I truly believe it's a metaphor, I don't think it means that literally Christ is going to come back. I think it's going to be a remembering of Christ consciousness on a global level. And I think that that's what Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, represents for me. Is Pisces was duality, which is essentially Watiko, because duality is getting stuck into the mind virus of thinking things are good or bad objectively, right or wrong objectively. And guess what's happening as a result of that? Divide and conquer. People think, oh, this is good, your side's bad, my side's good. And so they argue with each other. And what are they really doing? They're forgetting that the reason they're arguing with this person is because they are that person living a different reality. And so where attention goes, energy flows. And as the law of correspondence says, as within, so without. So if they are experiencing anger with this other person, it's because it's reflecting the anger within them. And part of that anger is refusing to accept who and what they truly are. It's all unconscious, right? As I've worked with clients. But I think that this age of Aquarius is helping people get to the point where they realize, hey, so long as you're not looking to hurt anyone, I'm not here to convince you how to live life. Like the famous philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, all these guys, they weren't as concerned with stating things and saying, you have to agree with me. They were just like, this is what I believe. And then someone else would go, this is what I believe. And they'd go, cool. That's awesome. High five. We don't need to agree. And I think that another big one of the biggest thirst traps of society is thinking that the point of learning is to convince other people that they agree with you. And if they don't, you need to work as long as it takes to make them believe what you believe. When in reality, you don't want to take that sovereignness away from anyone else. They are God experiencing God as well, the same way you are God experiencing God. And so our only mission here is to, like you were saying, and you spoke to this so well, which is another reason I brought up human design. My strategy for going through life is waiting for the invitation. And this is why I think you're a projector, because it's one of the main strategies for projectors. It might be the only one, but basically what I would do for a long time is I would learn about some really deep stuff. I mean, talking conspiracies, plant medicines, etc. And then I would regurgitate it upon people that weren't wanting to hear it. And then I would get like frustrated when they didn't want to hear it. And I'd go, no, you must not get what this means. Let me tell you more. And they'd be like, holy shit, kid, stop. Right. On the other hand, when you are just doing your podcast and being you, and you're wearing, the shirt you're wearing, whatever, and you're out in the world and you're loving life, and someone goes, dude, Mark, hey, like, where did you start learning about this stuff? Boom. Now the invitation has been made, and you can successfully and healthily place that info and allow them to go, cool, I want to take that on, or cool, I just wanted to know. And they form their own belief. But I think this waiting for the invitation strategy is so powerful for, it sounds like, people like you and I, because I want to tell everyone everything, but most
Well,
people aren't wanting to hear it.
I'm with you 100%, but I'm almost really grateful for that experience of not being met with, what I expected, because it teaches you how to explain yourself better,
Yes.
And then once you're a little bit like more iron and ready for it, you're like, okay, now it's not me, it's them. And this is when this lesson comes in, like, oh, okay, it's really not them either.
Yes.
And that's sort of, that's where you got to come to. But I wouldn't be as sharp as I am now if I didn't spend so much time arguing with people when I was a teenager and young man, and it definitely didn't win me many friendships, but that's actually, I think you can appreciate this on the East Coast. Maybe it's a little bit more appreciated on the East Coast. And I don't mean to just be so central to one location. There's other places in the world where this dynamic happens socially. But the reputation and authenticity do mean something around here.
Yes, 100%.
Whereas in maybe smaller towns where there's less of an option to go and be somewhere else, your community matters most. So you're more willing to sort of vibe with the tribe, because it means, hey, if I don't, I'm gonna be by myself, because I'll have to move or something, right? Whereas here, you could just hop over to the next town and make a whole new group of friends,
Yep.
But that, that comes with like, well, who are you? People are like, where the hell are you from? What's your real story? So being authentic is an extremely important thing, at least I've noticed, and that was a big part of learning martial arts, because when I was a kid, I just wanted to make friends, and if you're not true to yourself, you're going to get into a lot of fights.
Yes, 100%, man.
People aren't true to themselves either, but they notice what they don't like about themselves in you, and then they take it out on you. And like attracts like. So if you don't get out of that cycle, you stay amongst those people. And, there's that saying, like, you're defined by like your 5 closest friends or something like that sort of thing. And yeah, there's truth to that. But I also, I don't like to say something like that, because I know a lot of people out there might not be able to count 5 friends. I'm one of them who, at points in my life, that's how I felt. Now I'm blessed to have all these podcast connections and, the friends that have remained my friends throughout, the majority of my life. But yeah, even like from middle school to now, that's less than 5, because it's just the way life goes. But I think when you sort of integrate it in a way where you become an example, you start to become sort of like an outlet for people who are in the position you were 5 years back or 2 years back, or even 2 weeks back. Sometimes you meet people who are 2 weeks ahead of you and you're like, oh crap, I got to step it up, So I think there's always a learning, but right now I would say, yes, there's some kind of Aquarian spiritual water fertilizing the psychedelic earth.
And what's really cool about it too, is that with the age of Pisces ending, the masculine energy is leaving, and it's not leaving, but it's coming back into divine masculinity, which this is like such a silly term sometimes. And I recognize that, but what true divine masculinity is divine masculinity as compared to the masculine approach we've seen in society for the last 100 years or so, or actually a lot longer, but since like modern history for the last 100 years or so, the other form of masculinity tried to stamp out the feminine because it was scared of it. And why was it scared of it? Because it was scared of its own feminine nature. It was scared that it wouldn't be masculine if it was feminine, right? And so, whereas matriarchal societies of the past, the reason divine masculinity was there was because they recognized an equal balance between masculine and feminine energy. And men, this immature version of masculinity was projecting their own internal state. Well, if we're trying to stamp out femininity, then if we allow matriarchal societies to come back, then they're going to stamp out masculinity, not realizing that divine femininity does not try to stamp out the same way divine masculinity does not try to stamp out. It was a big projection. But I think that one of the coolest things I'm seeing that I love that is happening with me, I imagine it's happening with you, and it's happening with a lot of people right now, is that I have no want to argue my points of view anymore with anyone. I'm just here to spread awareness of what my experience of life is. And if people like it, awesome. If they don't, awesome, right? And I think that's more of this feminine energy coming in, where it's no longer that competitive masculine, no, you need to believe what I believe, and it's a battle and an argument until I win. And the whole point of arguing is just to win and to get one over on people. And I think that that's why if someone tries to ask me, well, how do you know the Taigetans exist? I go, I have no idea, but I choose to believe it because it's really fucking cool, you know? And so that's where I go on
all
things.
You need too.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with it. I'm with it, man. Well,
yeah, man.
Yeah,
Dude.
I think this double edition, right? Because people are listening to this from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, and they're also listening to this on the
This One Time on Psychedelics podcast.
This One Time on Psychedelics podcast. Thank you. I didn't want to say any variation of that because it is a little complicated. Now I get it. This One Time on Psychedelics. Yes. Folks, if you're listening on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, go over, subscribe to This One Time on Psychedelics on the same app you're listening on this, unless you're on YouTube or Spotify, in which case get a better podcast app. You could do that if you go to Podcast Index, just search that anywhere and you'll find some better podcast apps. But Ryan, this has been so much fun, brother.
Oh my goodness. Mark, where can people find you, man? Where can they connect with you? Where can they find the podcast? You just said a couple of places, but where can people find you and connect with you? Because I imagine my audience is going to absolutely love what you bring to the table.
Thank you. Yeah. Alt Media United is the podcast cooperative, and you can find my podcast there. Pretty soon you'll find Ryan's podcasts, multiple podcasts there. And then I will also direct people to myfamilythinksimcrazy.com to get maybe a more in-depth situation for what I've got going on, merch, support, videos, all that stuff. So yeah, a lot of fun, brother. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. And I got one last question for you if you're up for it, right? And that question is this. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Mark Steves would suggest to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Have a good friend there with you. And if you like to smoke weed, be careful because you're going to exhaust your supply and you're not going to feel anything. So just moderate. Okay.
I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, guys. When I first met Mark, after hearing about him through a mutual friend and having the opportunity to be a guest on his podcast, I was immediately intrigued by how many similarities we shared in common. And I knew I had to have him on the show to dive into the many rabbit holes we both enjoy jumping into. Mark is a true testament to what can happen when we use the feedback we get in life with regards to family and friends that may not understand our path to commit to our unique experiences of life even deeper. And for anyone looking to connect to Mark and the amazing work he does with his podcast and beyond, make sure to check out the show notes where I will be listing exactly how you can get in touch with him and where to find his podcast to feed the curiosity bug that resides within so many of us with regards to the many mysteries of life. If there is one thing I have learned about life, it's that it is actually what I don't know rather than what I do know that gets me fired up about life and allows each day to be a unique mystery that is simultaneously beginning and ending each moment. And my hope is that for those of you that resonate with that statement, dive into Mark's work to continue realizing how much you don't know and the liberation that resides within that lack of knowing. Mark, thank you so much for stopping by to hang with the listeners and me today, for daring to be different, and for being an inspiration for me to continue questioning everything I know on a daily basis. And until next time, my friend, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.